Who else has been having a go at someone? That's Paul Hogan. Now, you might recall after Pauline Hanson's speech at the National Press Club, where she talked about monoculture, that she was roundly attacked for this, and, you know, it was all sorts of stuff like the Socceroos, they wouldn't exist and wouldn't be winning matches at the World Cup if it were for this monoculture that Pauline Hanson wanted. So she gave a speech in the Senate, basically saying, pipe down, people. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is shared values. I want to get back to the Australia of Norman Gunston and Paul Hogan.
Accepting Australians means accepting our culture and the values, customs and traditions which define it, a fair go, tolerance, secular democracy, freedom of speech and religion and the rule of law. It means accepting our irreverence and larrikinism. Bring back Paul Hogan and Norman Gunston.
Well, Paul Hogan doesn't want to be brought back, it would seem, which I suppose makes sense because he's been living in the US for decades now. But he's decided to have a go at Ms Hanson because the AFR has rung him up and said, Mr Hogan, what do you make of these comments from Ms Hanson? And he said, I've always had a very simple rule. What makes a good Australian is wanting to be one. She's a pelican, yeah? Outrageous, so racist. It sounds very much like this stupid buffhead over here, Trump. Thank you, Mr Hogan. I'll take you up on the first point, which is that what makes a good Australian is wanting to be one, as though the only thing that qualifies you or can make you Australian is just saying, oh, yeah, well, you know, I wouldn't mind becoming a citizen of the joint. We do expect a little more of you to actually be an Australian. There are people who may well want to be Australian because it affords them access to all sorts of rights and welfare and various other opportunities that they wouldn't get wherever they come from elsewhere in the world. But it doesn't mean that they particularly subscribe to the values of Australia or that they believe in the value of the country more broadly. They just want to have access to what we have over here. I'd say those people are not Australian and they should never be considered Australian. Simply putting your hand up and saying, I'd like to be Australian, doesn't make you an Australian. I mean, if you get to that point, it literally means anyone could be an Australian. I don't think you can really have the basis of a country where anyone can be Australian. And I suppose the second point is Pauline Hanson, I think, to a degree, invited this. She made comments about Paul Hogan. Paul Hogan has the right to hit back, but I don't think Pauline Hanson's going to be sweating too much about it. She'll, as I said earlier tonight on Sharry, you know, she'll turn this around and use it for a bit of social media content and say, you know, the cultural elites don't like me, which is why they're after you as well, yada, yada, yada. You know, on your Paul, if you really were so concerned about being an Australian, you'd probably still live here.
Well, Paul Hogan's no Dave Hughes, is he? He's not prepared to put his lot in with those who want Australia back from the multicultural mishmash it's become. As Caleb said, it was entirely predictable that a journalist hearing Pauline Hanson's comments would find Paul Hogan's number and ring him and say, what do you think? And are we really surprised that someone who's made their living in Hollywood is not that keen to be associated with Pauline Hanson? The surprise would be, the news headline would be, if Paul Hogan agreed with Pauline Hanson. That he disagrees and calls her a racist is really hardly news. My thing with this is Paul Hogan's been living in the US in a mansion for the past 30 years. So I even wonder if his memory of Australia and what it's like now would be accurate.
That was what I was going to say too. I mean, Paul Hogan is so out of the Australian political loop. Clearly, if he's been out of the country now for 30 years, he doesn't understand nor grasp why Pauline Hanson is actually doing well in Australia, because the face of Australia has changed so much in the last 3 decades, and I would argue especially since Bondi, even more so. So Paul Hogan has no idea, no understanding about why voters are abandoning, say, the Conservative Party, like the Liberal Party, to go to One Nation, because there are a number of voters who are so disenfranchised by the major parties. So I think that he should maybe, you know, get with the program if he's going to try and comment on Australian politics. But if I was Paul Hogan, I would actually take it as a compliment that he was mentioned in an Australian parliament by Pauline Hanson, because that to me suggests that the character of Mick Dundee still resonates all these days later. And Mick Dundee was that dinky-die Aussie bloke, the guy that you can relate to, just that fair dinkum type of character. Take it as a compliment, Paul Hogan.
But here's the irony, right? There are a number of scenes from those movies that we could not show tonight.
Exactly.
Because we'd get all sorts of complaints.
That's it.
And I'm sure we would not be allowed to show them because it would upset too many people. Australia has changed, and he should know that by virtue of the fact much of his movie catalogue, and certainly the Paul Hogan show with Delvine Delaney. I mean, you're smiling and laughing because that was, by today's standards, so inappropriate.
I want to know what Strop has to say about it.
That's it. We're stropping all this, but the thing is that a lot of stuff that Paul Hogan, who he's made a career and profited off, would be offensive and maybe in some instances considered racist.
Well, imagine what people would say about Paul Hogan watching all of that stuff.
Absolutely, exactly. So look, Paul, if you're in the US, just stick to being in the US. Though he does call Trump a buffhead. I noticed in that particular article.
Yeah, which is kind of telling, right, as to where his political...
Where his allegiance
he doesn't
is
comment
lying.
too much on politics or the culture wars, but that comment that, Trump's a buffhead, just another buffhead, does sort of...
Stand up for Australia. Stand up for Australia.
Give away where he sits.
Yeah, stand up for Australia.
No one in Australia says shrimp anyway, do we?
Well...
Put another shrimp on the barbie.
I think we do.
What? Sorry, do you say shrimp?
I think it's like a funny term, shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah, only because of the line from the advertisement.
But don't you think it's like a funny word?
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll trot it out. What's the big deal?
But ironically or not? Would you go down to the supermarket or the fish markets?
No, but like if I'm having a barbie at home, I might trot it out.
Can I buy 5 shrimp, please?
No, I wouldn't say that. I was talking at home, Caleb. Like, put a shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah, ironically, because of shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah, but what's the big deal? I don't think it's a big deal.
No, I'm just saying the word shrimp is not an Australian term, is it?
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? It's just funny.
I tell you what, this conversation went way off.
I don't know where the heck did this come from.
What's this got to do with anything?
I don't know where this came
Paul
from.
Hogan's put another shrimp on the barbie.
Okay, it's offended Caleb, the term shrimp has Caleb's offended tonight. Just like Paul Hogan's offended. Caleb is offended by the term shrimp.
I know it was to sell to America.
An incredible turn of events this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just an incredible turn of events.
Quick favour, if you're the kind of person who loves Australia and wants to be up to date on what is really going on in our country's politics, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It keeps this channel going. Over 90% of viewers have not subscribed yet, and it would mean the world to us if you did. Thank you. Now, back to the show. The battle for who gets to define Australian has just become a fight between a crocodile and a pelican, and somehow both of them are losing. G'day, and welcome to the strangest culture war yet. Here is how it started. Pauline Hanson walked into the National Press Club and told the room she wanted Australia to return to a shared monocultural set of values. To make her point, she reached for the 2 safest cultural teddy bears this country has ever produced, Norman Gunston and Paul Hogan. In her telling, they are the real Australia, the larrikin, the battler, the fair-go bloke who does not need a focus group to know who he is. Then she sat back and waited for the predictable explosion, which arrived on schedule.
Because someone at the Australian Financial Review did the one thing guaranteed to detonate the story. They picked up the phone and asked Paul Hogan what he thought. And Hogan, from his home in America, where he has lived for roughly 30 years, came out swinging. He called Hanson a pelican, labelled her outrageous and so racist, and compared her rhetoric to Donald Trump. Then he delivered his grand definition of national identity. What makes a good Australian is wanting to be one. Now, stop and actually look at that sentence, because it is doing an enormous amount of work. On the surface, it sounds warm and inclusive. Anyone can be Australian if they just want it badly enough. Lovely. Except it is also deeply accidentally funny, because the man saying it built his entire fortune dressing up as the most cartoonish version of an Australian ever committed to film, Crocodile Dundee, the Paul Hogan show, a bloke who turned a stereotype into a swimming pool of money, now lecturing the country on authentic identity from Los Angeles. If irony could be taxed, Hogan would owe the ATO a fortune. But do not get too comfortable laughing, because Hanson's side of this is stranger than her critics admit. Strip away the headline and her monoculture line is not actually about race. She's arguing for shared values, the fair go, tolerance, secular democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the rule of law, and a bit of larrikin spirit. That is a very different pitch than keep the country white, and pretending otherwise is why this debate never goes anywhere. Before we keep going, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's how more Australians find this channel, and frankly, this story deserves a bigger audience. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody on either side wants to say out loud. Hanson's appeal is not really about Hogan or Gunston at all. It's about millions of Australians who feel the major parties stopped listening to them years ago. They're not voting for nostalgia because they're racists. They're voting for it because they're disillusioned. Meanwhile, Hogan, for all his charm, has been gone so long he's arguing with a country he only visits. Which brings us to the greatest punchline of all, the shrimp on the barbie, a phrase no actual Australian has ever said, invented by an American ad agency to sell tourism. It's the perfect metaphor for this whole fight. Two people arguing over a version of Australia that was always partly a commercial, partly a memory, and never quite real. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you